don't understand why you're 40 years old and playing the game still. So.
Well, I mean, what game do you think you're going to be playing when you're 40? When do you think you're going to stop playing games? What's the age? What's the cutoff age?
When you're out of high school and college.
You're a high school kid?
Yeah, I'm in high school. Yeah.
How old are you?
Why does it matter?
Well, I mean, you foresee yourself in the future quitting something you love, like video games? Do you not love video games? You just cruising through it?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of a waste of time when you're that old. But
well, how do you know? You're not old yet. I mean, I can think of probably reasons that video games would be a waste of time for a high school kid, too. Do you have a 4.0? Are you in honor classes to get more than a 4.0?
No, but...
You know what I'm saying? There's more things you could be doing to improve your life than playing video games, too, right?
Yeah, you study and not play games.
Hey, just recreation, man. Having fun. Ain't nothing wrong with that.
All right, then.
Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to Honey Badger Arcade's Week in Culture. My name is Brian. I'm here with John. How are you guys doing today? Hope you're well. Please smash the like button. It helps me reach more people. I know that this show is a little early for some, but I'm trying to get all of my work in during the day because I prefer it that way. I'm a bit of a morning person. So, hi, John. How are you?
Oh, awesome as always. I myself generally do a lot of these streams early in the day. Because when I'm not with you, I'm either doing stuff with Ryan Roger Thay on Reality Based or Will of the Fans with Will and, Ryan Roger Thay. I know we're kind of like the start of some people's day, and for other people that we probably cater to overseas, we're their late night stream, so it all works out.
Yeah. Tanishk Midage says, "Bro, are you gamer? Aren't we all?" I mean, it's in the intro, right? Right. We all like to have our leisure time, and we have different ways of doing it. And I think that it is essentially the birthplace of our culture. Whether we everybody has their favorite books, TV shows, movies, and games, and music, and these are all part of the culture. And that means that we have to keep the culture healthy, which is why I feel so strongly about this channel and what I'm doing here, even though it's small. But yes, this is a gaming channel, but it's also a cultural commentary channel, which tends to head towards more philosophical, political, dare I say, theological conversations. So anyway, with all that said, thank you guys for joining us on the stream. Thank you guys for joining us on the stream. And I guess before we get into the stories, because I only have a few picked out, but they might be we might go into a bit of a deeper dive into them as topics.
A lot of overlap today.
There is some overlap. So what I wanted to start with is, it is October. We're getting close to the end of spooky season, and we're literally less than a week away from Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
And since we're talking about, cultural stuff, my wife, she never watched horror movies when she was a kid. She was very sheltered from that stuff. I don't know if it was because of her parents or something about in the air in Canada that makes people squeamish, but she hadn't watched any of these things, and I got her into horror films, and specifically around Halloween. And it started with Friday the 13th, and we started playing the game, and she enjoyed the game so much, although it was a bit of a difficult getting her to try it, because she's one of these people that doesn't want to start new things, but then when she does and she gets into it, then it becomes the thing she wants to do all the time. So we played a lot of the Friday the 13th game back in 2018. We are currently playing it now. I don't know when we're going to get another chance to do it. Hopefully before Halloween comes and goes. But the reason why I want to say is that not only did she get into that, and then we watched all of those films, but she wanted to watch more films. So this month we've been watching sort of spooky movies. We watched the Addams Family film, the one with Raul Julia, which is great. I love that movie. And we watched the original Beetlejuice because she'd never seen it. Then we started watching some, more horror themed stuff. We watched the original, Nightmare on Elm Street, the original Halloween, and last night we watched the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And so
nice.
I've been getting her to watch these things, and it's actually interesting because of the discussions around it. Which hold that thought about Texas Chainsaw Massacre because we might come back around to that. There's a possibility because I have a theory about the times we live in and how the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a step towards the place we are at now, and that's all. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
So if
Sounds
you guys have ever
interesting.
seen any of those movies, let me know. What do you think about them? What are your go-to horror films? What are your favorites? I mean, I have a lot of favorites, but those are the ones we've been watching lately. So, all right, let's get into the stories now. Let's see. Potato Raven says, "I'm playing Genshin Impact right now. Love it." Yeah, I've heard things about that. I tried it for a little while. It just wasn't my jam. I also tried what is that one? Zenless Zone Zero. Very cool graphics and animation. Very cool. But yeah, not my cup of tea. But okay, so let's get into the stories. First, we got the Gayming Awards. So shout out to Smash JT. So I have like a couple of favorite resources: Smash JT, Fandom Pulse, and that Park Place. Smash JT does really good work. So if you're not checking him out, check him out on YouTube, or maybe bookmark his website because he gives the real skinny, and he's pretty good at what he does. And I think that he holds himself to a pretty decent standard. John Ford says, "I'm more interested in horror games than the movies." All right, well, yeah. Do you have a favorite horror game? I mean, Lindsay and I played Resident Evil 5 together. Resident Evil 6 together. Studio Dinostorm says ZZZ, that's Zenless Zone Zero, says was 90% UI and story, 10% gameplay, couldn't play. Yeah, that was same thing. I played it for a little while. I mean, if you like waifus, it's definitely got what you're looking for, just like Genshin Impact or whatever. But I don't know. I could take it or leave it. I like games that are like twitchy gameplay. I like that stuff. Okay, so anyway, the Gayming Awards. Let's look at this. Okay, so there wasn't a Gayming Awards show for gay gamers, GAY gamers, or really more precisely LGBTQ gamers that have more of an activist, slant to them. And they had an award show. What were you going to say, John?
Oh, no, I just, it's in the thumbnail. This just is very queer oriented,
Yeah. I made a video about this a while back, speaking of queer, where I tried to explain to people that queerness it has nothing to do with being gay or trans. No. And it's a political thing. It's a political position that you take. And anyone who identifies as queer for political reasons, which is the only reason to identify as queer, because if you're gay, bi, lesbian, or trans, then you'll just take those instead. They use that to inflate the demographic of the LGBTQ population, because they'll say, look at all, and that's actually what they do in this article. This relates to this article here. So,
yep. She actually is the reason why I made the thumbnail for today specifically the way that I did, because it is the queer state of modern gaming, and that is a political movement to force this ideology that modern day queerness is basically like we grew up in the 80s 90s. That's kind of like modern day queer culture is effectively like being like the dark emo kid back in the 90s. That's kind of my take on it.
Exactly. No, it's like being the outsider, misfit person. And today that would be a political position, whereas before it was simply, a kind of personality, right? It was just like your personality, or maybe it had something to do with your socialization, like if you were, bullied, or you were into weird nerdy hobbies that were kind of socially unfavorable or unattractive to the opposite sex. But
we used to have goth kids and tomboys,
Yeah. And then we had scene
allowed now.
kids, and now we have queer kids. And now, but queer kids are, again, they're much more than just, outsiders that are usually going through a phase that they eventually get over.
Well, unfortunately for queer kids, they get capitalized on by the medical industry and the pharmaceutical industry, and they basically get to be modern day pincushions for like all this weird kind of biological, hormonal therapy treatments that they're doing to try to sort out stuff for life extension technology. But I digress.
All right. So here are the supporters of the Gayming Awards. I'm sorry. When I say gaming, I spell it Gayming. That's how they're spelling it. And it seems to be a grift. And this is because of the amount of money it costs. So let's get into the article. So the video game industry has no shortage of controversies as I relearn what feels like every day, but one of the most blatant examples of profiteering comes from the Gayming Awards, an annual event designed to celebrate LGBTQ plus representation in gaming. On the surface, this might seem like a well-meaning effort to promote inclusivity, but digging deeper, not deeper than a molecule,
right, just
into
under the
their
surface.
Operations. Yeah, it's just under the surface if it's not right on top. But digging deeper into their operations and pricing structures, it becomes way more clear that this event is nothing more than a cash grab designed to extort ridiculous sums of money from game publishers and companies in exchange for promotional exposure. Not just that, but there's extortion that goes on here too, because let's get into more of this. You'll see what I mean. So let's take a closer look at the absurd amounts that the Gayming Awards charge for sponsorship opportunities. $150,000 to be a presenting partner, $90,000 to be an event sponsor, $50,000 to sponsor a single category or be the day sponsor, $50,000 to be an indie festival sponsor, and $35,000 just to be labeled as a supporter. These prices are astronomical for what amounts to little more than a variety spot or a vanity spot at a niche award show that very few outside the LGBTQ plus community and some game journalists care about. In fact, I would argue that most people who are gay, trans, or lesbian probably don't even care about this either, because they're just living their lives. And they're like, being an LGBTQ plus member of the population is not on its own a political position, unless of course you're the Q. But the people who are what I call the G Mafia, the gay mafia, the G Mafia is activists primarily, and they are like a subset of the population. So when people say, like, this is the thing I would say to Smash JT, just as a little word of advice, try not to use their words when you're talking about what they're doing. And what I mean is, try not to use community, because the LGBTQ plus population is not a community. They don't talk to each other really. They're not like in a club. They're just a group of people. It's kind of like saying the black community. There is no black community. There's the black population. And, those populations vary as much as any other population does. When you use their words, you give them a foot in the door. This is like one of the things that I try to push the most when I talk about these things, is that you definitely be careful about the words you use when you are talking about these issues, especially their words. So don't use words like community. If you can help it, try to figure out a way around it. Say population. Try not to use words like inclusivity, because that's their word. That obviously an LGBT event of some kind is by its definition exclusive. So it doesn't make sense to call it inclusive, right? So that's what I'm saying. Like, if you want to win this, this is about language at the end of the day. This is about language, and you have to be very careful with the words that you use.
Right. Well, you've heard me talk about like the dark magic, and the sleight of hand countless times, and that's exactly like they do try to cast people into cast a spell on people and just kind of put them into a trance. It's very hypnotic, reinforced repetitions, but like this what they're being exposed for unfortunately, this is a common practice with all self-flagellating, glad-handing, congratulatory backslapping award show ceremonies that are little more than corporate media, events to try to reinforce things that otherwise really don't deserve, any kind of second look because they lack the merit. And so this is just a way of kind of trying to platform for things that really don't have an audience to begin with. But yet, if they can put enough money and advertising or whatever behind it, they can present it and platform it as if, it actually has all this support.
Yeah. So yeah, again, this is like because we're all kind of like embedded in this sort of war of vocabulary, war of words, and we were born into it in a lot of ways. So it's very difficult to deprogram yourself, and that's what that's why I say, I suggest that we try to figure out a way to do that. All right. So this is a letter that got sent to all of the sort of publishers and basically devs that might be presenting at
interested parties.
Interested parties. Okay, so I want to read the letter, and I want you to think about like how this is in fact extortion. Okay, hi there. Did you know 1 in 5 of all video gamers in the U.S. identify as LGBTQ?
That's a little sus.
Remember the Q. No. It might be right because of the Q.
Yeah.
If you remove the Q, it's probably like 1%. Or maybe 5%, okay?
But that is why they use the Q for the catch-all.
Right.
Get in line.
Yeah, it's to widen the net. It's all about definitions. How do you broaden definitions? So anyway, that's huge and is well above the accepted community average of 8%. We know that there is a similarly large number of LGBTQ gamers throughout the UK and Europe too. Also, last year, $57 billion was spent in the US on video games. This means that the spending power of LGBTQ gamers is $11 billion in the US alone. You see that sleight of hand right there too? So first we broaden the definition of what it means to be gay by including queerness, which is again not a sexual thing at all. It's simply what is it? It's defined as an identity without an essence. So it's not essential. It is political. That's it. Okay. And then we claim that already expanded chunk of people spend proportionately the same amount of money on video games as the rest of the population. So and that's why they're presuming they spend $57 billion. But no, I seriously doubt it, because it's very unlikely that they spend as much as like your average regular gamer does. Right. And because that's like saying, for example, that women are 60% of gamers, like, which is a claim that was made back in 2014 when I was doing Gamergate then. But when you looked into the numbers, it was like women playing Candy Crush on their phones. And this isn't to say that they're not like some kind of gamer, but to presume that means that they're putting in as much money as the men who are playing like, full price console games or PC games is just a ridiculous claim to make. So this is what they're doing, right?
Yeah,
it's all
another
definitions.
Yeah, another aspect of the sleight of hand, because this is commonly what they do in IGDA, which I need to actually make a video about it because they just sent me a new survey for GDC. But what they like to do is they send out their surveys to a global, audience of people that they want to extrapolate data from. And then they'll go and they'll use those global numbers to focus on local policy. And so they're trying to conflate the idea that because we have this many whatever, numbers that they can get. And for a lot of people, as we've talked about before, they feel compelled to go along with putting the Q on there because it's like, well, I'm not really any of these things, but if I want to be able to get like possible grant money or kickbacks or any kind of just kind of greasing the wheels of momentum to get my project off the ground, I kind of have to play ball. And so Q is very much a nudging term to try to get people to get out of this, capacity to just kind of see men for men and women for women and gay people for being gay. And
For sure. I mean,
you
it
know,
is literally a slippery slope. Well, not literally, but you know what I mean. It is a slippery slope.
Yeah.
But okay. Again, a similar spending power of LGBTQ gamers is present across the UK and Europe. So what are your plans to reach this large marketing segment for Pride in 2024? We have 2 packages starting at just €3,000 or £3,000. Read more below. Gaming Magazine is the world's only LGBTQ video game magazine. It is the go-to resource for the LGBTQ gamer community, providing news, reviews, and stories about the video games world. Our annual Pride event, called DigiPride, takes place from mid-May through to the end of June. It's a key time for activations and increased traffic to the website, as well as our live streams, Twitch and TikTok, and social media. It's the perfect time to advertise with us and benefit from this increase in traffic and attention for the 2 months over DigiPride, mid-May to July.
Which is more sleight of hand right there, because now they've taken a 1-month event, which is, you know, the month of let's celebrate the sin of Pride, and turn it into a 2-month thing by putting 2 weeks on either end of it to try to extend it out. Like, that's the whole thing. Like,
they've already,
Give
there's
an inch,
more,
take a mile,
there are more
right.
gay holidays now. Like, there's like Coming Out Day, Trans Awareness Day, you know, Stonewall Day. Like, they're just like, again, this is about essentially like making the entire G Mafia agenda ubiquitous, so that we just see it everywhere, and then we're like, well, this is the new normal now. It's
reinforced, and you never get out of the haze of the queer kind of misting that they try to just kind of put all, and now that's going to be what basically all of summer, you know, or like spring into summer it's like say a 1-month thing, which is pretty asinine to begin with, is now 2 months.
It's ridiculous. It used to be. I remember. I remember, like, this is like in my lifetime. It was like a day, and then it was a weekend, and then it was a week, and now it's a month. And this was like in my lifetime that I saw this.
Right, and now they're saying
increasing.
that it's actually 2
and
months.
And now they're basically saying 2 months, and then they're going to make it 3 months, because they're just going to say, let's just do all of, you know, May, June, and July. The season.
Or
they actually did that.
Summer.
They did that already. They've already started saying it. So and it's not like, you know, this is stopping anyone from being gay all year round, but they want it celebrated. So, all right. Anyway, I digress. It's the perfect time to advertise. Right. I already read that. We have 2 Pride offers right now where we're celebrating by reducing our rate card prices by 40%. But it's still a lot of fucking money. Okay. So the sale is not really a sale. Plus, our upgraded offer sees your brand featured as part of our DigiPride programming on our live streams to hundreds of thousands of people. Again, probably not that many people. Right. And then they go through the tiers, and I'll just skip that. It says all of Pride offer 1 plus your product is featured on 1 or more of our Let's Go Gaming or gaming podcast streams on Twitch and TikTok. Product depending. This could be a demonstration, product usage, or even a short promo video you to supply. So
it's just marketing, product placement.
Yeah, it is marketing, and you know, they advertise this, and so I want to talk a little bit about what a grift is. So the word grift gets tossed around. I think it's overused, but not in a kind of fence-sittery kind of way. I mean that it has a specific definition, and we're back to the words thing again. See, a grift really only works if the thing you're grifting on is something that is a popularly held position. Okay, so on my other channel, where I work my regular job, I talk about men's issues, things like father's rights, things like false paternity fraud, child custody, family courts, false rape allegations, false allegations in general, the damage is done by the Me Too movement. You know, and that requires me, by the way, to be critical of the current paradigm of gender relations, which is the feminist paradigm. It's the lens everyone operates under by default, okay? And you know this because if you go out into the regular world and tell people that you don't like feminism, and watch how many people come after you for it. So it is a very unpopular position to hold. you can't grift off of that, because grifting means that you're basically pretending to be in support of something that everyone supports and then using that to extract money. This gaming thing is a grift for real, because the LGBTQ agenda is not unpopular in the mainstream, especially with people who have deep pockets that want to support this from a, like, to either virtue signal, to pat themselves on the back, to look like they're morally superior to others. That's generally the reason, or they legitimately want to push this into, like they want to normalize it. Okay.
Well, oftentimes this is coming from, a top-down corporate kind of risk aversion way. And when I say risk aversion, I mean that they're, specifically trying to play into the grant monies or, the revenue kind of kickbacks that they'll get, at that level. And so for them, it is risk averse to try to force this into as many people's kind of, purview as possible. And with these games, they're not actually celebrating things that are valid, that, they're quite literally just offering you, hey, are you willing to pay us money so that we'll talk up your game and like make an event around it and act like it's actually something special?
Mm-hmm.
Which is pretty ludicrous and corrupt AF.
Yeah. So this right here is a grift. Like what I'm doing, or what a lot of people in the space that are sort of like part of this broader culture war conversation, I would not call them grifters, even if they're
buskers.
Maybe they're what?
Buskers. Like when I used to live down in Savannah, down on River Street, they had a lot of people who would, play guitar or this or that, and you were called a busker because you'd have to go and get, a business license to do your song and dance, quite literally, and what have you. And it was a way to legitimize yourself. And so that's more often than not what's actually taking place through YouTube channel kind of interactions. You play to your audience, they throw, effectively tip money in your hat or your jar, what your box to collect, your money from the audience. And that is technically busking would be the appropriate term.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. So what I'm saying that's not a grift. And so when sometimes there's a little bit of infighting going on, and it's always something. Like I know in the comicsgate space, there's infighting going on. I think that it's essentially egos like clashing against each other, and they're kind of like losing sight of the real goals here. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, because I got this video that was made that I want to address, insofar as I think people are misusing, like I said, the term grifter when applying to people who are making content like mine. And because I say, and this is what I say on the other channel, where I essentially am a very vocal anti-feminist, that is fine with criticizing women for making, bad choices and being treated like children, because that's kind of like what feminism does. It essentially treats women like children, which doesn't allow them the opportunity to grow and become virtuous people, because they're always being excused, and there's all this things that work around them. So it is to their benefit that I'd make these criticisms, but my particular focus is on men's needs and boys' needs. Right. But if I wanted to be a grifter, if I really wanted to get rich, I could just become a feminist. I could put out a video and say, you know what? I've seen the light. I'm a feminist now. Here's all my feminist content. I know all their talking points. I know all their arguments. I know how to game the system because I watch how they do it. I could literally become probably a millionaire if I just said I'm a feminist. And that would be the grift, because I don't really believe it, but I know it fits me, right?
Well, right. Well,
I really believe it.
Yeah, feminism itself, has abandoned femininity and women in general for the broader queer trans community. Yeah, but
that was always the goal. Feminism was never not rotten. It was always bad, and it was always ultra about essentially destroying the family. That was it from its inception. Yeah, but it's about destroying the family. It goes back to speaking of October and Halloween, okay? Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, who wrote the book Frankenstein, her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, is, like many would argue, the proto-feminist, the woman who created it. And Mary Shelley was, she would go to Lord Byron's house and they would have orgies and take drugs. I mean, they were hippies before hippies existed, and they were like the reason for, everything that spilled down from there. It was always evil. It was always anti-family. And it even has like truly satanic roots, like occult roots. Okay. And if you don't believe me on that, I would check out, Rachel Wilson, this woman named Rachel Wilson. She wrote a book called Occult Feminism, The Secret History of Women's Liberation. And in it, they go through all of the sort of like weird culty things that these people were into, including like sexual rituals and shit like that, way before
it exists all the way. Yeah. It still exists today. That's what all the Hollywood Wiccan,
absolutely,
Wiccan writers.
That's right. That's why there's lesbian space witches and lesbian comic book witches. Like, that's why, because that's what I'm saying. It's never gone away, right?
No.
So, and that's where the grift is. So this is not what I'm doing. Is not. It couldn't be, because I'm not profiting at all. I just believe what I'm saying, and that's how you know. So, anyway, So this gaming magazine, there's actually obviously like a what do you call it? There is a violation of sort of like, the relationship between game developers, game journalists, and event organizers. They're obviously all in bed with each other. And so this again is just
in many ways.
In more ways than one, right? So, I just wanted to highlight that, because we are talking about,
There is something interesting, though, about this publication, if I can call it that, is that it purports itself to be the gay, the singular entity. But if you've ever read GameIndustry.biz, if you go to their website, which is where, Kim Beller, who we've talked about many times, used to be one of their featured article writers. She talks about creating the Whisper networks and doing all the kind of stuff and this and that there. And it is very much about, identity as representation kind of motives and things like that. So like this Publication specifically may be the one that actually calls itself out, for this is Rudolph's red nose, but there's plenty of reindeer is kind of what I'm getting at, And, the industry is been indoctrinated and overtaken in a quite, broad sense through a lot of industry publications, specifically because they don't think people would look into this kind of information, because that's, they hide this stuff in plain sight. That's how seduction works. Is like, the distraction is the stuff that we would normally get caught up in. The seduction is there's actually websites that have stuff like this expressly stated and just like right out in front of you.
Yeah, I think the Gayming Awards is trying to be, or at least they're marketing themselves as, like the largest, gay gaming website or whatever.
Their website definitely is gay, though,
I'm sure it is.
Times. Well, I mean, just in the sense that this white background and everything like that, good God, it hurts the eyes. Like, it just goes out of its way to kind of like, just be very cringe-inducing and just hard to even deal with. Gives you a headache almost looking at it.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like, this works on a couple levels to make money. One is, you give the people you're trying to grift off of an opportunity for them to virtue signal. Like, we gave money to this cause because we believe in this cause so much, right? The other thing is that, like, you can also put these people in a kind of double bind where they're like, okay, so if we don't support them, are we going to get bad press because they're connected to journalists, and so they can write hit pieces about us, so we better give them money. So it goes back to like the shakedown, right?
Like
so
Kim Beller says, terrify them. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you hate gay people? Do you hate the LGBTQ plus community? No. And that's like, this is the thing too, is that it's exploiting the thing that it claims does not exist. So
Right.
you basically
That's the
tell
risk aversion I was speaking to.
yeah,
Is exactly that nature of kind of getting people into, oh no, I have to do this. And it's not like risk aversion in the sense that it's like, oh well, we're not wanting to cause problems. No, it's quite the opposite. It's doublespeak.
yeah. And so like that puts them again in a position where they're being extorted, they're virtue signaling, and either way these people win, and that's kind of why I think they can like ask for so much money. So this is a grift, and that's basically what I got to say about that. And I think it's obvious, but we know now that like if you see something, especially if it's niche, like I don't know, like Afro punk, whatever, like that, that's a grift going on because it needs to appeal to something on the presumption that thing does not, or that there is oppression going on. So like LGBTQ people claim that their lives they're literally being killed when people don't use their actual, like when people use the name they're born as or use the wrong pronouns, but they're also like constantly being like harassed, or they're being killed, or there's higher levels of
about
abuse.
All this oppression, but more often than not, it's the 42% of their own collective,
for sure,
of what have you, that tend to take themselves out of the situation.
Yeah, but they have that, but they use the victimhood bucks that they acquire by making all of these ridiculous claims to make money, which means they have to literally appeal to the thing, which is compassion for LGBTQ people. They have to appeal to something that they also have to claim doesn't exist. It's in the same way that feminists will claim that men hate women while appealing to men to do something about it. Which would
the risk aversion is the grift.
Yes. It's part of it, at least. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say about that. Let's get into the next thing. I guess we'll talk a little bit about Metroid. Speaking of feminism, so let's go into this. The future of Metroid is in serious doubt. We may have some problems here. So, Mercury Steam, the Spanish development studio behind Metroid Dread and Castlevania Lords of Shadow, is raising those proverbial eyebrows once again over recent social media choices and their potential impact on future Metroid games. The studio has drawn attention not for its gameplay innovations or upcoming projects, but instead due to an ideological shift that has many fans concerned. I will count myself amongst them. So there is... Why can't I look at maybe I can open it up here. Hold on. It didn't... Okay, hold on a second. I'm going to open this up in a different... thing here. So is this a Smash JT? I'm gonna open it in another browser. Hold on. So or another window. For some reason it didn't open everything. Maybe it is. No, here we go. I'm gonna share this tab instead. All right. So the studio drawn attention to this person. Mercury Steam has followed some, let's say, controversial figures on Twitter lately, particularly the activist named Blizzy, and that has now sparked some discussion about whether Metroid's beloved lore-rich universe is at risk of becoming yet another battleground for social issues not related to the franchise. Why is this? So, this is a Spanish game streamer or online personality. She is a feminist activist out of Spain, and she is a devout acolyte of Anita Sarkeesian.
Yes.
So very intersectional. Okay. Let's see here. I wanted to... One studio known for high stakes action games. Yeah. I'm trying to find the bit. Oh yeah. Backed by several activist organizations, Blizzy's platform pushes for the censorship of in-game content, especially regarding portrayals of women that she claims perpetuate harmful norms. For my Spanish-speaking amigos, there's a video here. So she is from Spain. I want to talk a little bit about that in a moment.
I know this is completely a non sequitur, but it almost looks like that reads herpedias, like herpedias, like Spanish herpes.
Yeah. Blizzy's public history aligns her directly with the goals and methods of Anita Sarkeesian's feminist frequency, and her influence has only grown due to her governmental ties. For years, she has caused a platform to criticize games featuring female characters with revealing clothing, arguing that this aesthetic combats heteronormativity by enforcing what she perceives as outdated gender stereotypes.
It's Spanish Kim Bel-Air.
She has Anita Sarkeesian's books, like How to Be a Woman on the Internet and stuff. So she is an intersectional feminist. Now, so I know this guy who lives in Spain. You probably know him, or you've seen his artwork around. His name is CULT-ure, and he has a let me find his work so you guys can see who I'm talking about. CULT-ure. I may have misspelled it, so because it's not coming up. But
I doubt that there's a photo that exists of her without her phone in it.
What?
I'm just vamping. I'm just vamping while you look for the thing. I'm just saying I doubt there exists a photo of her without her phone in it. Like,
sure. POV means. Well, I can't find it, but it's okay. So there's this guy named CULT-ure. He was an artist, and he used to help make our thumbnails for Honey Badger Radio back when Gamergate was going on in 2014, 2015. And he is from Spain, and he makes Gamergate comic strips, or he was for a while Gamergate was going on. He was putting them out, and then he kind of stopped because he was doing some other stuff, and now he's back doing these. I think it's called, it's like a series of comic strips about Gamergate that involve Vivian James. I think I've seen a couple of those then. Yeah, you probably have. I'm sure you have, because they're everywhere, and he was pretty prolific. But I had him on. We talked because he's from Spain. We talked on the show, and here's the thing about Spain, and I know this to be true because again, I work at Honey Badger Radio. We know what's going on in the world. Spain is an insanely feminist country. Like it is like one of the most feminist countries in all of Europe, if not the most. And so because of that, you have a Ministry of Gender Equality, like it's something out of 1984, which is essentially a Ministry of Women. They just can't call it women because it's a little too on the nose to just say gender equality. So they have a Ministry of Gender Equality. They're totally down with censorship. They, it's extremely corrupt. And this woman comes out of that. So this is like what a culture like Spain today will produce to people like this. So this is extra concerning. And again, we don't have any proof that she's going to have an effect on Metroid as a franchise going into the future. But a couple of things. The developer of the last Metroid... What? Oh, it's very sus. The developer of the last Metroid followed her on Twitter along with some other people. Her whole brand is criticizing video games that go, that I guess perpetuate
questionable content.
Perpetuate what she considers to be heteronormativity and outdated gender stereotypes. So this is I think this is actually extra interesting because we're talking about Samus, okay?
Right.
So Samus is supposed to be like the number one go-to. You can't criticize this character feminist because she's been around since Nintendo's 8-bit era. She is a strong woman. She wears armor, all of that, right? Whatever the defense
is. It's
is.
nearly 40 years at this point.
Or
maybe even more,
My point is
1985 was first,
right. She came out like in the mid 80s.
Yeah.
My point is though, it doesn't matter. This is why I because people be like, oh, look at this. You can't possibly criticize this example because da 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 da. These people don't care, guys. They don't care. She's gonna tear this down. It doesn't matter. Like the fact that you even have like some thing that you can bring up as a point of defense, it only emboldens them to try and tear it down more. Because at the end of the day, we are not in a culture war. We are in a marketing war. This is all about like making your case. If you're good at rhetoric and you're a
Right.
good salesperson, then you can make anything reality. And that's what they do. Like, look at so Samus is probably one of the best examples of, you know, that goes against the whole feminist narrative of like women are, you know, are not represented slash I don't know, exploited sexually slash
Right,
whatever
right,
it is, right? She's the strongest case against it, but it doesn't matter because all you're still playing by normal rules of like reason and like
Right.
logic, and these people are not. They're operating under a completely different set of rules, and you don't even know what
Right.
the game is, right?
Right.
So like,
Oh yeah, I mean, this is like when I was in jail. You know, like no matter what your toolkit is, no matter what your rule book in life is that you go by, that's not anybody else. And these people, when they kind of show you exactly the plays that they're planning on making, you get a good idea, like exactly what they're all about. And there is no, you know, deviation here from what is clearly a ideologically bent kind of motive that is right there in the broad daylight, you know, for everyone to see, not even trying to hide it. You know, like this is somebody who, you know, is been given the tools to turn the screws specifically and try to you know, pin people down into a situation that should not be. Like this is quite obscene.
So okay, I'm gonna try and elucidate or like sort of get into more what I'm talking about. So to these people the truth doesn't matter, okay? To these people the truth doesn't exist. The truth is something that they can create with their words. It's all about marketing. So
Right.
if you don't like something and they think you should, then their job, their mission becomes convince either you that you should like this thing or convince as many people as possible, preferably people who they consider to have authority, like
Right.
people in the media, for example, that you are wrong and that you are the weird one, you are the outsider because you don't agree with them. And this is a very powerful tool that we have to learn how to use. I will give another example, okay? Let's talk about politics for a moment. So we got the election coming up. It's very close now. It's like less than 2 weeks away, okay? And the Biden, this is in the United States, for those of you guys who are not American. So we have like Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris, okay? Kamala Harris's campaign has essentially weaponized the entire media, academic, Hollywood apparatus against Trump and anyone who agrees with his, you know, politics, which are completely pragmatic. But it doesn't matter, right? Their mission is to make him sound crazy or make you appear crazy, or unhinged or evil or whatever it is. So it's all about what are the words that we have to use? What are the things we have to reinforce? You know, like this is why there's always like these certain phrases or words that they use with repetition. Like they'll say, you know, I don't know, fascist, Nazi, those are obvious, but they'll say things like joy and vibes. They'll say brat. They'll say, you know, he's going to be a dictator day one, January 6th. Like it's all about like, how do we, when we just say the words, the phrases over and over until you think that, well, I mean, if enough people are saying it and it's coming from so many different directions and it's so like, you know, ubiquitous, if it's so like around us all the time, there's got to be something about it that's true. And so you end up like collapsing.
That's the thing. Is specifically these people believe that you can brute force something into the truth. It doesn't matter how obvious of a lie that it is, but if you can actually, you know, just repetitively make it what people have to hear, what they have to deal with, what they have to swallow, what they have to like, you know, like just have everywhere they look, which is the whole thing about like the nonstop rainbow culture and all this kind of stuff, trying to appropriate, you know, that into this thing about like, oh, well, this is queer acceptance and blah, blah, blah. When, you know, everything they do is, you know, it's a psyop and a very insidious one, you know, that preys upon your good faith, because they lack it. And that's what I was saying about like the whole thing about like people who, don't operate under the same kind of paradigm of, directive that you do. They will do whatever it takes, because to them to conveniently lie in the moment is, whatever it takes to quote unquote win. There is no actual legitimacy that we're all operating on even ground. This is very much, I have, the high ground because I have this government kind of support. I can actually, have all these things that I can lean to. And if you don't go along with it, then I'm going to call you, cis, like they come up with all these new words specifically because it's to obscure and confuse and corrupt and muddy the waters of, what would otherwise be, something that's very clear and straightforward, where you could actually have, possibly a debate or a conversation actually. But that's not what any of this is about. This is, like you create the rhetoric, you create the, kind of distraction element so that the subversion can actually take place. And so that's what we're dealing with.
Yeah, and another example from the political that I'd like to bring up is in Michigan there was a rally, and Eminem was there.
Feminem?
And Feminem? Yeah.
Feminem, yes. He's been caught in drag.
But oh, for sure. But then I still think it's pretty effective. Right. So he was on there because this is what they did. Like they okay. Why do rocks or musicians that are famous or movie stars, the Hollywood apparatus, why do they often like step up and essentially make an endorsement or even just like ridicule people? What was it that Tenacious D said? What they
next
thought they were.
Miss.
Yeah, they said don't miss next time, right? About the assassination attempt. Yeah. But the assumption was that a lot of people and people in the audience did agree. They cheered for that. Okay. Mm-hmm. So this is how effective the marketing is. It's like we have dehumanized this person enough that their death won't not only will it be ignored, it will be celebrated. Because we have significant or sufficiently conditioned people towards this with our marketing. It's like and so like as another example of that, we had Eminem, right? So he's like speaking at a rally, and he basically tells people a bunch of stuff that's pretty like unimpeachable, like, oh, it's important that you vote and have your voices heard, right? Those things are fine because that's like, but it's so generic. Like right. Oh yeah, who's gonna say that that's not okay? So you start with something that sounds a position that's completely reasonable to the point where it's obvious, and then you say, well, here's the actual payload of what I want to say, which is essentially, Kamala Harris is like good for the country and Trump is bad for the country, and then he's like, to back me up, here's Barack Obama, and he brings out Barack Obama, okay. Because that's all they got left now is like the guy from like 7 years ago, okay? And Obama comes out and he doesn't say anything about policy. He doesn't say anything about like what the plan is. He doesn't talk about any ambitions. He doesn't say anything. You know what he does? He says, it's hard. I don't have the quote in front of me here, but I will say that he said it was hard for him to follow Eminem. So first he reinforces like how significant it is that Eminem came up on the stage and said this. And by the way, they brought Eminem up on the stage because it was in Michigan and because Eminem is from Detroit. So these are all very, very planned out things, okay? Mm-hmm. These are very planned out things. So he brings out Obama. Yeah, and then Obama says, instead of like saying anything that has to do with what the Harris campaign or a Harris presidency would do for Americans, he doesn't say anything about that. He doesn't have to. He doesn't have to. He just says that, it was hard for him to follow up that act, so much so that his palms were sweaty, his knees weak, his arms were heavy, there's vomit on his sweater already, mom's spaghetti. That's it. He literally just says some lyrics out of the
Arf,
Eminem
arf,
song,
arf, arf,
and
arf.
people were
Yeah.
just like totally. And that's what I'm saying. Like this is how powerful this is.
Yeah,
like
it's still
they
clapping.
did this with who else had come forward to make, and all of these people are paid. This isn't like they're not just making. I mean, some of them are making a choice. Like you know, I'm sure Ron Perlman is really like riding with Biden or whatever. But no. Let me finish. But we had Michael Keaton come out and say something. We know they got paid for that. It was really stupid. We had Paramore stop in the middle of a concert with the camera on them to send a message, which we learned right afterwards was completely scripted, and she was reading from a script, like a teleprompter, and what to say to people. We had there was what was it? Dave Bautista, who was basically
With
like
his pearls.
hitting. Yeah, like hitting, with his pearl necklace, hitting like a heavy bag, because they're like, this is unprecedented, by the way, as an aside. I have never seen in my lifetime, an administration or like a running party that was trying to figure out how to get men to vote for them. I've never seen it. Women, they have it unlocked. They locked it down, okay? But men, they're panicking.
Them the carte blanche to, do with their bodies as they choose, which, I don't know. Like, if we're going to allow for that, what it actually is, it's basically the way that women get they get a free pass on killing.
Well,
there's no other way to say it.
For sure. Well, for sure. I mean, that's what I think. But like with men, they don't have anything. So they throw Batista in there to shame, to shame men, essentially, like men who support Trump, whatever it is. So, but it's all about power at the end of the day. And I wanna also like nail home one other thing. So Eminem was useful because he had so much fame and clout. Some of which you might wonder if it's even legitimate. That was sort of like, it was like an investment. So when he started out in like the 90s, I think that there was an effort to invest in him as someone who could be useful later for political power. I think that is like the secondary purpose of celebrity status, is to essentially tell people or endorse causes, endorse politicians, endorse people in general, to support them. Because how could you say no to Eminem? How could you say no to Susan Sarandon? How could you say no to Michael Keaton? He played Batman. And this is like these adult pretenders. They are pretenders for a reason. They are actors. Batista is an actor. The guy we're going to be talking about a little bit later that dedicated a game to his father is an actor, like he like that. And so you have to take everything they say with a grain of salt, because especially
in light of the world we live in right now with Diddy parties and Epstein Island.
A lot
of these people are highly sus. Absolutely.
Well, no, but that's also part of it, I think, because you also so like, let's say you get you're a big wig in entertainment. Doesn't matter where, record label, film studio, whatever. You're a very powerful person that can essentially just anoint people and make them famous. Like, this is literally what Hollywood does now. It does not, and I've been saying this for a long time, just like every other aspect of our creative culture, whether it's visual art, comic books, animation, movies, video games, whatever. There are gatekeepers, and the gatekeepers are essentially the people who get to decide if you are a genius or not. It's not based in merit. It's based on they choose you, and then you have to play their game. And this is something that stand-up comedian, what's his name? It's on the tip of my tongue. He died of diabetes. He was a black guy. I think you guys know who I'm talking about. He was very funny. But he said, and Dave Chappelle has talked about this too. He's basically, he didn't go into detail, but he's basically said that the business of show business is a beast that essentially consumes people. It makes them famous, but it keeps them in their pocket. And there's a lot of ways they do that. And one of the ways they do that is if you go to these Diddy parties, or you go to Epstein Island, or you go to whatever, you go to Bohemian Grove and, you know, drink, or you go to a spirit cooking session and you get involved with, you know, essentially sin, and then they use that as leverage to control you. And we know this happens. Like, I'm not saying anything like out of the ordinary. We know this happens. We know that this is the state of Hollywood. Like, when Jennifer Lawrence, who is like, her talent is mid at best, but they decided she was going to be a star and they just made her one. And some people, they get out of it. Some people get out of it. They see what they're writing on the wall and they get out of there, and then they like go and pursue a regular life. Like, I think, what's his name? Andrew Garfield might be an example of that. Okay. The guy who played Spider-Man in the, after the Tobey Maguire movies. It seems that, you know, he's come out recently in defense of Mel Gibson. Now, this could be because they worked together on a film that was pretty good. It was about a medic in World War II. I can't remember the name of it, but it was a good movie. I saw it on the plane. And I think that he has gotten out of there. And some people, they have to go through a lot of suffering, and then they sort of come on the other side and they say, you know what, I don't know what I was doing, but I got to get out of there. And that was like Shia LaBeouf has left that. Mark Wahlberg has left that. Mel Gibson has left that. There's a couple of other examples, but you can see it. You know, Zachary Levi, who we talked about last week, right? Zachary Levi has left that, and now Jamie Kennedy. I know who Jamie Kennedy. he used to be on I don't know, was he on SNL or something? I know he had a show called the Jamie Kennedy MTV. He was on MTV.
He had his Jamie Kennedy Experience. He was also in Scream.
Yeah, he was in Scream. Yeah, that's right. He disappeared for a long time, and he made a movie called Heckler, and which was basically kind of painting himself as a victim. But he's like, now he's come out the other side, and he's like, what the fuck, right? What have I been doing? Dana Carvey also, you know, what's his name? The guy from James Spader, is that his name? I don't know if I might be thinking of somebody else. No, not him. You know, like the guy who used to be in the Chris Farley movies with Chris Farley.
Oh, David Spade?
David Spade. Yes, David Spade. Yes. So like those are some examples, right? And but like what I'm getting at is that the when they make someone, the purpose is to use them later. And they rely on the idea that their fame...
That's why they're called useful idiots.
Right. They rely on the idea that their fame gives them credibility with normies, and then they exercise that. So when Eminem comes out and he presents Barack Obama, that's a plan in the making for several decades. Like, they were like that, and they try to do this with other rappers, by the way.
It's bread and circus.
Some of them, like in the rap game, for example, some of them do play ball. Some of them like end up they go along with it. Yeah.
A lot of gay black rappers kind of
exactly. There's a lot of rappers on the down low. But then there are some, you know, Cat Williams. He came forward and had some things to say. So we know this is happening, okay? We know that they use drugs and sex and orgies and pedophilia and whatever they can get their hands on to essentially put people in a position where they have to use them later to gain power. And I think that's why I say this is a marketing war.
Right.
Like
the Eminem one is even really weird and strange, though, when you actually, because like they don't ever want people thinking about context or, you know, beyond the moment that they've got you standing in, right? Because if you think back to like what is, you know, Eminem's original albums known for, talks about you know, disembowelment, decapitations, you know, like basically sending his daughter off with Dr. Dre, which the implications there, especially given what we know about the Diddy parties and all this kind of stuff currently, is like, and yet, you know, because he's now sitting here saying that Trump is all these terrible things, and you've loved me and idolized me for 30 years because, you know, we have this break of people actually having internal strength and having like, you know, actual like, you know, I guess, you know, before the word that, you know, has been co-opted, community, like when we actually used to have small community kind of living and things like that, where you could actually like, you know, like deal with people on a one-to-one level. That's not what we have anymore. Most kids aren't even raised by their parents. They're just sat in front of a piece of technology and, you know, the smoothing of their brain begins, and they're just kind of it's not called programming because it's what's on. It's like it's what they're doing to you the entire time.
Mhm.
And so get them while they're young, while they're naive, and get them to go into this idol worship, quite literally, and have like a complete and utter disconnect, so that they will be more pliable and be like, oh, he said the thing, arf, 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 and like they're all just clapping like stupid fucking seals.
Yeah, yeah. And so like I think that is what like the truth of it is, that these people plan for very far ahead for stuff. And then they just like, why not put someone in a compromising position, and then we can use them at some point in the future, and then like we'll use them to gain more power. So and I only use the Eminem thing as an example.
Seduction, distraction. This is black magic.
You know who else came forward in support of the Harris campaign? For any of you juggalos that are watching, yes, the insane clown costume.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that is so.
What about? Oh, here's a really good one. What about Rage Against the Machine? Like, I mean, like, and Green Day. Like, these are supposed to be punk bands, but they're totally compromised, man.
All right.
Right? I mean, there's nothing. It's like it's so much a lie, and it's fed to us on the deepest level. So I want to bring it back to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because so here's where I bring that back around, because I think that these things are very old. Okay, so let's talk about Texas Chainsaw Massacre for a moment.
It's like made first like of all, 1977 or something like that.
1974. Texas Chainsaw Massacre came out in 1974. It was made on like $20,000 or something. It was a very small budget, and it shows, and it's extremely weirdly shot. It's basically like an exploitation film. Right. Nothing like slasher movies like Halloween. I think Halloween's pretty sophisticated, actually. I think I like John Carpenter's work a lot. And I'm not saying that Texas Chainsaw is a bad movie, but I think it's it is what it is on purpose. But here's the thing about that I think is interesting. So it came out in the 70s, and it was billed, or at least promoted, to appear as though it was based on a true story. The way that it's sort of like presented makes it seem that way. And there are inspirations, like Ed Gein, I think, is one of them, and another guy. But it's not actually, it's obviously not based on a true story. It's completely made up. But one thing that I actually had not seen that movie in so long that when I watched it last night, it was like watching it for the first time. And the thing that was really interesting about Texas Chainsaw is that the director, let's see if I can find his name, because I don't want to get it wrong. Hooper? Yeah, Tobe Hooper, right. I think that's right. Tobe Hooper, he made the film because he was angry with the Vietnam War. He hated America. He hated capitalism, and he hated eating meat. He was like a vegan or vegetarian activist or something. And so he made the film with all of those things in mind. And he wanted to push that message. So yeah, I mean, look, I'm not saying that you can't like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I think that like if we're going to be talking about messaging in films and some of them being a little bit spot on, I think that's a good example of how old this is. But more interesting to me than that is that, well, before that movie basically created the slasher genre. I mean, there's like Psycho came up before that, but it was kind of like a whole new thing. But Texas Chainsaw really started the slasher genre going. So it was after that we got Halloween, and then Friday the 13th, and then Nightmare on Elm Street, and the rest is history, right? So forth, yeah. But the thing about that that's interesting was one of the reasons why that genre was changing was because before that, horror films were sort of Victorian, like they were like Dracula and the Wolfman and the Frankenstein's monster and the ghosts and demons and maybe, and things like this. But around this time period, the people like this guy wanted to say, well, you know what? Maybe the most terrifying thing isn't, a supernatural force.
Right.
And it isn't something that's defeated by like, faith, because like Dracula is vulnerable to crosses, right? So he wanted to say, no. The enemy is here. The enemy is this place. It was the enemy within, as Trump put it. That's what he was suggesting. That's why it takes place in Texas, which is basically the most, at least perceived as one of the most American states in the country.
Right.
And he was making a statement about how he believes that America is evil and capitalism created Leatherface. I know that seems weird, but that's actually what is said. Like they used to be, they used to work in a slaughterhouse, and they all lost their jobs, and they basically didn't have any way of making money, so they started to cannibalize. That's actually the plot. I'm sorry. That's weird, but that's the plot. And it presumes that capitalism is evil because that's what he was criticizing.
Well, again, it's like this is reinforcement is what I've been talking about. Like since you've known me, this is dark magic, and like I said, they use a lot of weird forms of deception to seduce you and lull you into a transitive state. And like this is all about like kind of breaking your mental faculties and your focus through forms of distraction, so they can implant and incept ideas into your deep psyche. And that's and there's a reason why movies are sound, light, vision, like the whole thing. Like it's a seductive kind of way to draw you in and immerse you, which is kind of strange that in this day and age now they use a lot more kind of off-putting distraction, but it gets you into that kind of rage state, or just kind of like taking your focus off the fact that we can actually see a lot of these entities that are doing the dark magic now. Yeah. And they're because like nowadays they don't even really try to hide it, because they're like, oh, well, we've got a Pavlovian dog kind of response. We just have to get blood in the water or do the thing and get people to go after like, these specific kind of, as you say, devils in the details. And if you get caught up in these details, then you won't actually kind of see the thing that's standing right outside the fire while they've got you burning up and inflamed. And
I think it's in layers of inception too, because another thing I want to bring up is that it's really interesting that slasher films about mass murderers became very popular right at the beginning of the 70s. And the reason why that's interesting to me was because in the 60s, we had like the free love movement and all of these like human rights, civil rights fights going on, the second wave feminist movement, the civil rights movement, like for blacks and the Black Panthers. And there was all of these revolutionary things happening. And we had the Vietnam War going on. And this is where it gets interesting to me. We had the Manson murders, right? 1969, the summer of 1969, where Charlie Manson's family, his cult, the family, which, by the way, in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there is a family as well, right? And he sent his family to go kill, like, those Hollywood elites. Did you know that the reason why what Charlie Manson wanted was a race war, and he was using this to start one because, again, of the feminist movement, which sort of like got involved with the civil rights movement. And you had like these communists, revolutionaries like Angela Davis that were pushing for this kind of violent uprising. And so Charles Manson wanted to like get that going, and he basically got his harem. I don't know. He had thralls. He had like a group of people under his charismatic power, and he got them to do this for him. Yeah, they were enchanted, whatever. But the other thing is, I think this is also interesting, is that we also had the uprising, or the sudden sort of like exposure of LSD. Okay, and there were tests done with mice that shows if you give mice significant doses of LSD, they become murderous psychopaths. Okay,
right.
And it was also the CIA was making this stuff. I know I'm going like super deep. But bear with me for a moment because I'm going somewhere. Okay, I want you to think about this. I'm not claiming I know all the answers. I'm just looking at pieces that are sort of floating, and I'm trying to bring them together because I think there is something there. So you have,
I'm right there with you, man.
yeah, the CIA, right? They know there's the MK Ultra is real. Okay, it's a real thing that they were doing, and it involves psychedelic drugs like LSD. And before, when the Manson murders happened, the whole country was shocked because nothing like that had happened before. Not that there weren't like murders. Obviously they existed, but like at this scale and this sort of high profile, and involving all of the factors that it did. Right. So what I wonder about is the Summer of Love ended with the Manson murders. That basically killed everything. Okay, no pun intended. And there's talk about, like I said, the government being involved. Extremely potent drugs like LSD, which are made in labs. It's not like marijuana. It doesn't grow in nature. Right. And the Tates, that's what it is. Sharon Tate and her unborn baby were killed, amongst others. Roman Polanski just happens to not be in the country at the time. Super weird. And then from that you get like the whole culture changes, and there's still all of this animosity towards the Vietnam War, mostly from communists, because the main issue that people had with the Vietnam War is that it was communist countries that were being invaded, and they were acting like, you shouldn't have gone in there. It wasn't your business. And maybe that's just truth to that. I'm not saying there isn't, but it wasn't like a completely unjust war, but there were a lot of protests against it. But I think it came down to the fact that it was anti-communist. And so the communists in the States at Berkeley, which at the time they were like free speech advocates, they were like chanting free speech, but the only reason why was because they wanted to be able to criticize the Vietnam War and have some change made, not because they actually believed in free speech in principle, because after they got power, they're the most censorious college like in the country, or one of them, so they don't really believe in it as a principle. They just used it as a useful tool to get what they wanted, right? So then what I'm thinking about is this guy Hooper, the director of the film. It's funny that Manson may have either he probably used the drugs himself, but he may have also used the drugs to get other people to do like horrible atrocities on his behalf. And I don't think he's the only one, because not only after that did we have like a sort of spike in these kind of serial killery movies, but it was actually a spike in serial killers. How soon after that did we get Son of Sam, Ed Gein, what's his name?
John Wayne Gacy,
Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer. And you have to wonder, like, how many of them, I'm just throwing it out there, maybe I'm crazy, but how many of them were also like on MK Ultra? What about the guy that was in the tower with the sniper rifle or whatever? Do you remember that? That's old, right? That's a classic.
Yeah. So God, I can't say his name right now, but it's Natural Born Killers. They say his name directly.
So that you go ahead.
Well, it's just I would say this is mirrored in what we're going through right now. Not to deviate too much from the point, but like when we talk about the game industry, I believe my weird conspiracy is that a lot of what we're going through in terms of the destruction of the industry is so that they can bring in AIs to take over for all these developers that we're complaining about currently, so that they can actually do this whole thing where they're trying to control information ultimately, and and make it easier for people to be dumbed down through these constructs of artificial. I would more likely call it superficial intelligence, that it just spins out like the information, like you see it happening on Facebook now, on multiple when you do a search, you'll get like an AI excerpt and a summary of what's even like, oh, you don't even need to go to the website, just let me tell you what the information is. And so like a lot of this stuff is about just getting people to break their consciousness and their discernment and their ability to actually think through a thing themselves. And they do it in a variety of ways. Like we're sitting here talking about, like, using the shock horror of, serial killers and, like, mass murder and things like that. And ultimately, like, those distraction tactics get people seduced into not realizing that this entire time they're the one being worked on. And that's the exact same thing that's happening right now is, all this distraction is so that they can seduce us into thinking that, hey, you know what? These developers are so trash. We'd probably be better off if games were just made by AI, that we could have more control over this or that.
Sure.
I digress.
Yeah, no. So, like, okay, the other thing I wanted to say about that is about what I'm getting at here is that this is why I think it's Inception. So let's just run with the theory or the idea that serial killers are being created or were being created through the MK Ultra program. SSRIs, like mind-altering drugs. Some of them legal, some of them not legal. Doesn't really matter. But
cocktails.
Yeah, they are. Yes, and they're used to blackmail celebrities or politicians. They're used in a number of different ways. So why is this strange? But let's say, okay, that a majority of the serial killers that are the most high profile, the ones that we know about, are not just like manufactured to some degree with the drugs and everything, but also promoted narratively. Like they get the media attention. We get reports from the media of, we caught this guy. He has people in his basement. We caught this guy. We caught this guy. And then all of a sudden, you create a new moral culture, a new culture of people that think that serial killers are everywhere and they're dangerous, and that creates a new market for horror films. And so this guy, he is also responding. The director of Texas Chainsaw Massacre is also responding to something that was, in motion before, and he responds to it and his frustration with the Vietnam War and stuff by making this movie, which in and of itself is made as with the intent of getting away from the old Victorian horror films of the past, like Frankenstein and so on, despite the fact that those movies or those stories were also written by like degenerate outsiders that were their own version of the sort of like modern day, hippie communists of the 60s. You had like Mary Shelley, who I mentioned already, was, a feminist and the daughter of the first feminist, or at least the oldest one that we know of. So like it's all like, and Bram Stoker, the guy who wrote Dracula, was homosexual, and he wrote the story about sexually transmitted diseases. That was what the inspiration for Dracula was. Look it up. I know it's weird, but it's true. So like even our most like known works that goes way back, there's roots in it that are kind of dark and and they're complicated, and they're not, but yet they're not that unique compared to the kinds of stories that we tell today. And I think a lot of it has been sort of like funneled or gatekept in a way that we're getting away from, potentially like the beautiful, the good, and the true in content that could be out there, because there's like a funneling that's happening, right? There's like an active siphoning out of the good, the beautiful, and the true in exchange for the profane. And we're just finding new levels of profanity as it goes down. That's why, like, what's the new thing everyone's watching now is Terrifier. I never saw it. But it's just downright like, as edgy as it gets as far as horror goes. So it basically, we watched Texas Chainsaw and I was like, this is actually pretty tame in terms of gore effects. I was expecting worse.
The expression, there's nothing new under the sun. You can apply that to a lot of things, in the sense that you and I are talking to each other ostensibly through fire. We're sitting around a campfire in modern day, back prior to these flat panels, working off of, LCD or OLED or whatever kind of panel technology it is. Prior to that, it was phosphorus. And, it was about, tell live vision, like this whole idea of like, channeling. That's why, they're channels. Like a lot of this stuff, quite literally, it goes all the way back to these stories that predate, technology. And so like what we see advancing over time are just revisions of what we're already dealing with. And so that's quite literally, there's truly nothing new under the sun. We are reinforcing things. It's like people act like nowadays we live in a time that is somehow more obscene and weird and strange. And it's like, no, it's harder to, kind of distract unless they find new ways to kind of, to meet you where you're at with the level of depravity that we've normalized, and so like that's why there's this constant pushing. It's like the whole idea about these activists always having something to complain about and always being a victim and this and that. It's because that's what they're trying to reinforce, is to make sure that inceptive element, that to be there as a distraction agent and this and that, they're always going to be there. It's just we're seeing the modern interpretation of what goes all the way back through our collective history.
Yeah. And I think it's like you said, it's nothing new under the sun. It's all in cycles. But I do find it, I guess my main point of that is to say that, the marketing, which is what we're dealing with, it goes very deep, and there are multiple layers, and a lot of it is like it's like a self-generating machine. You just start the motor up, and that again in the 60s, let's say, you started up with those revolutionary movements of the 1960s, and then you just let it take on a life of its own. And I'm sure we can trace it back even further than that. I know we can, but I'm just saying, but you start at one point, right?
Right. Well, both you and I went to art school, and like when you're in art school, like they teach you foundations and principles of design and things like that. But the other thing they teach you is marketing concepts, which are psychology. And, like this whole thing about like, how to, like, it's the whole thing that I always bring up here about you can't spell, design without DEI, and that's what narrative design is all about. Like all this stuff is just ways to incept and, indoctrinate. And, what do I often say as well? Like, like there will always be another witch to burn. And unless we actually figure out where the coven resides and like put an end to the witchcraft, there will always be another witch to replace the last one. Like we're sitting here talking about this crazy, woman over in Spain. And I said, she just seems like the Spanish version of Kim Bel-Air, because Kim Bel-Air herself is a disciple of, these kind of indoctrination tactics. I'm pretty sure that she has a background in Cambridge University as well, which a lot of these people have weird connections to a lot of the same institutions for a lot of the same reasons, because they are actors who have, the agency of a higher level that is being channeled through them to just simply like amble about as like, the puppets on the strings that are being made to, carry out these actions. And if they're not going to do it, well, then we'll find someone else who's just as compliant or more compliant and more pliable and willing. And however they go about doing that is how, we'll get it into focus. And so these kids today that are being, subjugated and kind of, exploited at young, naive ages to be overtaken with all this hormonal therapy and like, changing their biochemistry, like the way that they think, the way that they'll even be able to live through the rest of their life. This is all leading to, like, just think about where we're going to be in another 25 years of them normalizing all this transgenderism, calling it transgenderism is actually being too kind. It's transhumanism. Ultimately, like, all this stuff is about trying to put an end to the human population of useless eaters that they would consider you and I to be, and it's a very small sect of society. It's kind of like this whole idea about people act like we have more money today than we ever did before. And no, we just have more inflation, which means that, the money that goes out today,
our money is worth less now. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And so it's not that things cost more. It's just you have to use more money to buy anything.
Okay, so we're gonna move on. I just wanted to let me know what you guys think about that in the comments. But yeah, words, the meanings of words are really important, and we're gonna get into that in just a second. Let's move on to the next thing. So Legendary Drops made a video. So Legendary Drops has been like kind of on the verge of figuring this out. I remember him making videos about, Concord and what happened to it and his disappointment with that. Warhammer Space Marine 2 and how he felt like, oh, wow, I feel like I've been missing this, right? All this time.
I think
so,
there is a problem that he has in his deduction, though, is that he tries to not be seen as being obscene or, trying to offend people. And that's going to prevent him from actually being able to put the pieces together, because there's certain things that you and I will talk about that he won't even broach.
Yes.
Which we'll get into. So
he made a video called The Real Impact of DEI in Gaming. I watched it, but I jumped up to this time code. And I showed it to the people in my Discord. If you want to join my Discord, please consider going into the description and clicking on the Discord link so you can join it. And let me see what people said about it.
My Discord link is down in the description as well.
Yeah. It's also join both of them if you're on Discord.
Yeah.
So I will play this clip. And there was another guy named Jay the Concept who also commented on a similar thing, but I don't have that one here, but I can get it. But let's listen to this.
Now, identity is the only thing people talk about. Now, this may come as a surprise to a lot of people, but genuine racism, bigotry, and hate actually exist. There are studios and developers today that are under a constant barrage of hate from fans and people that will never even play their games. Just recently, I watched a panel that was criticized.
All right, let me pause right there. I know he's going to go into a panel thing, but not about that. To say genuine racism exists as though it's some kind of like mind-blowing revelation is kind of ridiculous, because it's the internet. Like, there are people that are going to say things that you don't like that doesn't mean anything. Like, it's the internet. And then to say developers have gotten a lot of hate, can I see some receipts, please? Like, I'd like to see what the extent of the damage is. I think that the only purpose of saying this stuff is to basically appear reasonable. Like, I'm a centrist. Watch this. I don't like racism either. And it's like, whoa, you don't like that? Like, you're not doing anything new. You think that you're like changing the game. I'm going to change the game up. Ooh, I like people of different races.
Yeah,
Nobody
I'm
cares. Like, that's a nothing burger.
I watched this whole thing, right? And we're right on the cusp of something that I have some very interesting connections to. So I'm going to go in a moment, because I want you to play the part. But I've got like a whole little diatribe that I'm going to spew here in just a minute.
All right, let me play the clip.
Of hate from fans and people that will never even play their games. Just recently, I watched a panel that was criticizing comments that were made by the studio head of Tales of Kanzera Zhao. The studio ended up announcing their hiatus due to the game's poor performance. A game that ultimately failed because of its deep ties to Sweet Baby Incorporated that already generated a lot of distrust, and also it was being praised and promoted by the least trustworthy people in games media. The studio's lead, Abubakar Salim, back in May, spoke in a video about how often he's been told that he hasn't earned his position, how he's faced prejudice and attacks, and it actually felt like a genuine heart-to-heart, only for the video to end with him announcing a promotion for the game and it being heavily discounted.
Okay, well, I know we're not at your part yet, but I want to say, again, this guy, Abubakar Salim, literally exploited, right, his own victimhood as a black man, by the way, who gets paid probably boku dollars to do voice acting for video games, but he's still the victim, guys. He's still the oppressed victim living in a white supremacist society. So he exploits that. It's just like I said before with the gamer LGBTQ thing. They exploit the thing that they claim doesn't exist. In his case, sympathy or compassion, or the non-racism of the average person, to sell a product. And this is like, I don't know why Legendary Drops is being so charitable here, but this is absolutely disgusting behavior, and if he deserves all of the criticisms that he gets, because
this
that
guy's
is
directly
just
connected to Kim Bel-Air.
Well, of course he is. Of course he is. And and again, people aren't just hating on like Sweet Baby Inc. products because it's got the name attached to it and they're just like playing this game. They legitimately see the issues and they're like, this is broken. And they see it's called pattern recognition. And you see a pattern of a company putting out trash or a company's involvement with something and how it always comes out as trash. And then the people who like were involved, whether they're with Sweet Baby or the development team themselves or whatever, they attack the gamers for not buying their crappy product and also saying they're not going to buy it. But anyway, I'm going to play the rest of this.
Evaporating any goodwill that the video was supposed to represent and ultimately making it feel like a marketing scheme. The panel who again, what did I say? This is not a culture war. Well, it is, but it's ultimately a marketing war, and that guy's playing the marketing war. So when you say it feels like a marketing scheme, no, it is a marketing scheme. Like, it doesn't feel like it. Like you're being really charitable to these people.
Yeah,
I mean,
he said, and more or less, he said that my dad died, and so I dedicate this game to him. And if you don't buy it, you're a racist who doesn't.
You don't care about my dead dad if you don't buy it, right? Of course. Okay, but anyway,
chose to criticize Salim, made up of a few well-known figures on Twitter, instead of making thoughtful criticisms. Only chose to mention things like Rafiki when making fun of the way that he dressed, or saying that he's never met his father when he mentioned his dad passing away, and that the studio should have been called Spear Chucker Studio. It's disgusting, abhorrent.
Let me finish the clip.
Blatant racist behavior that belongs nowhere near and does not represent any of the genuine criticisms that we've had for either Surgeon Studios, Abubakar Salim, or Tales of Kanzera Zhao, or the rest of the industry for that matter.
All right.
So I'm going to say my little piece here because I am directly connected to the person they're talking about, who is Ryan Roger Athay. And you know what? I had just as much. It took 4 days for it to get around to Ryan, for them to. And if the terrible thing that he said was the word spear chucker, and now they're trying to like turn it into all this other stuff, saying, oh, well, it's these other things he said that are abhorrent. They're going to keep trying because they tried for spear chucker. And they found out that nobody gives two shits. Because if you look back through history, and even the very first second of the game that Zhao, this Zhao title is all about, the very first image that EA has, you actually chuck spears in the goddamn game as an actual legitimate weapon, is the very first thing that they even show in the marketing. That's right. So this whole thing, and I pointed this out earlier this week, because I don't have a large following. And so I went on to Twix and I made a statement that I said, with all the, with all the bluster that this began, what kind of person would even dare to say the word spear chucker right now? I said, well, probably a problematic white guy who, is here to point out that this is all just a whole bunch of clout chasing, ankle biting bullshit being, spear charged by people that are simply trying to, root out weakness in people that they want to, undermine and get something over on, which since I don't have any of the clout that they're trying to chase after or break down, or, I'm connected to Ryan Roger Athay, who's connected to Hypno. And this happened on, Hypnotic Saturday Night. I'm not afraid to talk about this because you know what? We're real people and we actually talking about a real thing that took place. And so they're trying to turn this whole thing around and try to say, well, this is so offensive that anybody would talk this way. And that's why I said this guy right here, he's never going to get to the point. He's never actually going to make the grand discovery because he's afraid about offending people in an offensive time where, our entire discourse is being overtaken by this insanity. And so to actually deal with the obscene nature of this mass marketing sell job, well, guess what? You have to fight fire with fire. You don't take a knife to a gunfight. And so, with this specific issue where they're trying to pin people down on certain words, the content of what you say, this is just more thought crime, normalization, insanity that's actually not going to get to the point of where we're actually at, because we're talking about what we had just said. You have to destroy the coven and not just the witches. You do have to destroy the witches on your way to getting there. But, we've been talking about this for months. We've been talking, and I know they have been as well. But by the degrees that they try to come after people, nobody's come after me. Not even one. In fact, I've actually had growth in both my Discord and on my YouTube channel. And I've been saying spear chucker every day since this whole thing began. More and more with each passing day. And even in this video, they say the word spear chucker. But you know what a spear chucker is? It's a proud warrior. And as I said, if you look throughout history, we're all spear chuckers. And a lot of these people that want to sit here and complain, this guy himself is a spear chucker. You know why I say that? Because he sits behind the comfort of some keyboard or a camera and saying whatever he thinks he can get away with to build his own self up, because he talks later in the video about how he's close to 100 or 200,000 kind of viewers or this or that. So ultimately, he's marketing himself as the safe, reasonable, person who's got a level-headed mindset that you should listen to, when all he's doing is actually being a useful idiot for the very thing that he thinks he's fighting against. I don't care if people think I'm offensive or obscene. You're goddamn right I am. And that's the point. Like, I go by problematic white guy for a reason. And it's not because I am one. It's because that's what I've been labeled as by society now here in the 21st century. I've got an entire backstory and history of being a medical professional, knowing all the things that I've done. I was FDA certified phlebotomist. Worked in a naturopathic holistic doctor's office for nearly a decade. I was basically, an unlicensed nutritionalist, but I worked directly under a doctor who knew all about herbal medicines, Western, Eastern philosophies, all these kind of things. But people want to reduce it down to, but you have like a violence charge against you. Yeah, and the violence charge was put on me by somebody who is genderqueer, outweighs me by nearly 100 pounds, and attacked me. And then once I got free of their attack, went out and called the cops on me. And I wasn't thinking that that's what was going to happen. But I ended up having to, work myself through a very intense situation. I'm getting some kind of static. I'm not sure if people are catching me.
I don't hear it.
Okay, so, as long as you don't hear it, then I think we're all good. So anyways, point being, I know what it's like here in the 21st century. And we do not live in a land of justice. We live in a land of law enforcement, where the color of law carries out all sorts of weird Star Chamber kind of bullshit. And these people who want to sit here and think that you can somehow be civil and be obedient and actually fight against this thing that doesn't play by the same rule book or the same toolkit that you're operating under. That are willing to say whatever is convenient in the moment to undermine you and undermine the situation and sit here and try to demonize people that are actually calling out the demons that are doing this fucked up thing. They start the goddamn thing. But rather than actually being able to say, hey, you know what? These guys are actually fighting fire with fire, and this actually is a battle, and we just have to kind of like sit back and watch it, be what it's going to be. And it's not going to be pretty. Because if you've ever been in war, war isn't fucking pretty. That's kind of the whole point of it. And so, am I going to say things that people are going to find to be a little bit pear-shaped, if not outright obtuse and offensive? Goddamn right. And that's the point, because we are living in an offensive time right now. And the only way that we're going to get past it is by actually dealing with it in the way that it needs to be dealt with. And that's calling it out to its face directly, not being afraid to say any word or anything that someone might find untoward. Because you know what? They say the worst fucking shit that never even existed 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. I don't know what the hell cis even means, but I get called a cis hetero, what the fuck ever. Like, they say the intention behind it is that they're basically saying that I shouldn't exist. And so that's not offensive. They're allowed to say it because they're using weird words like neurodivergent and all this stupid fuckery that they just kind of like pulled out of some book or out of their ass to try to like justify their point that they're somehow more civilized. This whole concept of civility as censorship is one of the biggest things that we have to fight against. And it doesn't help when we have people like this acting like they're somehow like, trying to do the better thing and be on the same side of the event. But also, I don't want to be painted in the same brush as these obvious racists. Fuck you, man. You're a piece of shit. And if you don't like it, then just deal with the fact that I, called you that and you want to come to me and actually hash it out. I'll be more than glad to talk to you at whatever level, but I'm not going to do it in civil terms because we are beyond civility. And to act like we are somehow beholden to some kind of civil discourse when our entire way of life has been completely undermined and completely subverted by all this distractionary indoctrination and inceptive bullshit is just, that is abhorrent behavior. You are a useful idiot. This guy right here that we're watching the video of has no fucking clue what he's actually allowing to take place because he doesn't want to step on anybody's toes or hurt anybody's feelings. I'm not that guy. So you can either listen to someone like this and all of his hundreds of thousands of followers that he ultimately gets around to like talking about how important it is, or you can listen to someone like me who isn't afraid to like not get a following because I'm just here being open and honest and just being a goddamn real human being in the 21st century. And with that, I'll let you take back.
All right. Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately, this is optics that he's worried about, and so he feels, I think, okay, I've seen this before many times, where people are essentially saying they try to appear centrist, so they're very good faith to the people who are clearly the offending party, and they are bad faith to the people who maybe they're frustrated or they're angry at the situation, and they may say things that I wouldn't say that they regret, but they'll say things that other people might be bothered by. But I don't think that matters. I think I'm with you. I think that we're way past that. The thing is that the people we're dealing with, and again, this goes back to what I was saying about marketing. They're very good at being extremely offensive without being vulgar a lot of the time, without like directly calling you names or directly, using slurs or whatever. But instead, they have like the, Dolores Umbridge approach. Dolores Umbridge from the Harry Potter books. She was pink everything, but probably was the most evil character. That's their thing. They are like that. They don't use an iron fist all the time. They use a velvet glove, but they slap you just the same. And guys like Legendary Drops, they fall for that. They fall for the tone of things being different. Like the guy who told I forget the dude's name, but the guy from this game who told this whole story about this is for my father, and here's the story of my father, also buy my game or else you're a racist. That is far worse than just saying spear chucker, like in my opinion. And yeah, when he says this is obviously racist, like, no, I mean, like they're being edgy and it's a live stream. People are going to say things, whatever. I don't care. Right. But like if you make that the focus, and also, to talk about Jay the Concept for a moment, he basically said this is bad for us. See, that's another thing though. You got to get over this, okay? These people don't care how careful you are with your words when you make your argument. You can have like the most rational, the most well thought out, you can script it, you can be like super careful, and they will still attack you in some way. They will frame you as racist, or they'll just dismiss you based on your skin color and your sex. They'll just, so like it doesn't really matter, and you're wasting your breath, right? Abukar Salim, thank you, James. So let's play the rest of this, but that's kind of my issue. This is like, I just want, and the thing is too, centrism, which is what he's trying to do, it's kind of its own virtue signal. It's like, I'm smarter than both of you guys. Why aren't you like me? He's like floating above everybody else. It's annoying. Yeah, exactly. I'm better because I'm more civil. It annoys me to no end. Like, you're not in search of truth. You just want people to be civil. And what you ultimately don't see is that you will still lose because the people we're dealing with don't care. They really don't. Like, they literally want to burn the industry to the ground. It because it's in the video. You said, that they're saying this, and you're still like, well, how can we compromise? What's the halfway point between burning the industry to the ground and, like, I don't know, bringing in new talent based on meritocracy that's going to give us, like a healthy culture that we can partake in? What's the middle? Where's the middle ground in that? Where's the fence so I can sit on it? And it's like, dude, you're worse than these people because you're a coward. You're a coward that doesn't see the writing is on the wall. There are people that this isn't like two groups or two camps, because that's he assumes that there are two camps, and one camp wants to burn the industry to the ground on the on the altar of like woke gay race homo globo homo communist like ideology, and just for the lulz because they hate the people who actually like pay into the industry, like the gamers, the cultural partakers, the people who like movies, the people who like comic books, the people who like television shows like science fiction and fantasy, the people who like to play video games. Those people, they hate them. They want to destroy what they love. That's one camp. And the other camp, you think, are people who just like what? Hate women and minorities and gays in their games? That's what you think? And then you're like the special niche group of people that is normal and civil? Like, no, that's not what's happening.
Feminist,
this is like, right. This is, okay. This is just like, well, it's like the people who say like, okay, I'll bring up a reference to something political again because I do a lot of talk about that.
Yeah.
People like Konstantin Kissin, who works at a channel called Trigonometry. It's a podcast, and he and his friend, they do a bunch of interviews, and they call themselves politically non-binary because they're politically homeless. And this is the same kind of centrist bullshit that I'm talking about, because this is not left versus right. This is the left versus everybody else, like everybody else, like the monarchists, the libertarians, the ANCAPs, the fucking, the conservatives, the paleocons, like whatever. Everybody else, the normies, the moderates, and the left. That's what and that same thing here. There's the people who want to burn everything down, and then there's everybody else that doesn't know. Right here, they either don't know what's happening, or they do and they don't like it, and they have different ways of expressing it. But ultimately, that's the divide, and you can't sit on the fence there. You have to pick a side. So either help them burn it all down, so we know who to make fun of,
and that's what's
or
happening.
Like pick up a shovel and help us out over here, right?
Right, and that's exactly what's happening. He's getting bamboozled under the idea that, oh well, we can just do this, but we just have to do it in civil terms. It's like, well, yes, the fuck what? We've been talking about how they've destroyed civility decades ago, and they're making more and more deranged, more and more by each passing day. So it's going to actually take a certain amount of people that have derangement in the sense of, I'm not next to the line of civility. I don't want to be, because I find that when you go down that road, because this whole thing is about turning. He is literally a useful idiot trying to turn around saying, well, I'm not one of these racists. And these racists are really the problem because all they're trying to do is grift. And no, that's not at all. Because I'll be quite honest.
How do you grift? How do you grift off of an unpopular opinion? Like, that's what I'm saying.
Right. Well, this is the thing. Ryan Roger Thay didn't even want to give it a moment's notice. He didn't even want to ultimately make a statement. But because he was, basically coerced into saying something, you know what he said? I stand by what I said the other day, and I'll say it again if I have to. But, and that's why I love working with Roger. Ryan Roger Thay is a great guy. He, all the people that we actually deal with, we have different viewpoints, differing perspectives, differing backgrounds. We're from different parts of the whole world over. And so for these people to sit here and say, oh, well, but you're all white. But you know what? We're not all white. Hypnotic is, Puerto Rican. Ryan is a Welshman. Will from Will of the Fans, he lives in the Philippines. His wife is Filipino. They want to sit here and try to paint this broad brush. Leon, he dresses as a Leona on Friday nights when there's enough money that goes into it. It's a joke in and of itself, because it's trying to actually show the bozo nature of the whole situation. It's like when we used to start the show and you would have to sit here and say for the first minute and a half, 2 minutes, look, I don't have I don't think that I'm a little girl or any of this, it's just, these are ways of communicating, in an entertaining way, because there's a vast difference between someone sitting behind a camera and someone who's actually putting on a show and actually trying to, entertain while at the same time informing, which we've been doing now for nearly 2 hours about this thing that we've been talking about in depth in a variety of ways that is still, actually grinding away on the exact same theme from the moment we started. And we do a lot of shows like this where we don't necessarily move from one issue to the next, to the next, and to the next, and have it like completely homogenized and broke down. We generally have 2-hour long discussions when we talk about the stuff that we get into, because all these things are connected by these little invisible threads. And it's only by actually dealing with the ways these things connect and actually understanding who your actual enemy is in this whole situation. And it isn't, the people who are obscene, that are outright obscene, And as you said, and I'm going to say the exact same thing, I think this guy is worse than Salim Abubakar, or whatever, Abubakar Salim, however his name is said. Point being, that guy is at least upfront about what he is and kind of how his activism works to a degree. But he too is another one of the tribe of, well, we just need to be civil. And so if you're going to join in with the civility people and be another one of these thought crimers who's sitting here trying to tell me what I can and can't say, well, get fucked. That's the whole point of this whole goddamn thing. Is I believe in freedom of speech. I believe in artistic integrity. And I believe that, you could actually have natural DEI by if you just allowed people to tell stories that are actually stories that are stories to be told, not narrative design concepts that you have to follow a script on before you can even ever get to the point of telling the story, because that's like the 7th point down on the list. This is all marketing. This is all psychological psyoptic bullshit. And everybody needs to understand that that is really what's going on. And it happens by degrees. We are dealing with the deepest, darkest black magic that has ever been cast into our reality. And I know people don't want to sit here and think that, technology that we have is somehow associated to, dark crystals or anything like that. But this is an LCD screen. This is quite literally a crystal ball that's just been turned into a plane. It uses all sorts of, electrical components, minerals, metals, all this stuff. This is magic of the highest order. But because we, made it in some lab somewhere or a factory, somehow, now it's just technology. Words are malleable. And this is the whole point of what we're talking about. I can use certain words, and the words that I choose to use will either point you in the direction of where you're going, or they'll distract you by pointing you in the opposite way. And so, this is the thing that people need to understand, is we are dealing with deep, dark deception. And to sit here and act like that's not what's going on in this day and age just because it's presented in a way that seems like, oh, well, we live in modern times. There's nothing new under the sun. I will say it again, And that's the nature of reality that we're actually dealing with. And people like this will always miss that because they want to sit here and think, oh, well, there's some civil path to the center that we can all come together. I don't need to come together. I'm a fucking individual. I'm strong and independent. And that's all I need to be, because I live in America and I'm a fucking American. I don't need to sit here and get along with everybody. Just, as long as I don't get into a position where I'm all out, violent and this and that, but words are not violence, and conflating words with violence is part of the problem. And that's why this guy is completely off his fucking nut. And he's not going to get anywhere close to ever actually solving the mystery that he thinks that he's somehow so close to getting sorted out, because he's too afraid to offend himself, let alone anyone else.
All right. Well said. All right. I guess with that, I should end it because we're out of time. We were gonna. Well, I'll read your super chats. It's okay. Sometimes that's what happens.
Yeah, it is what it is. Yeah.
I'll read your super chats and then we'll end the show. So James Op says for $10. Thank you, James. Abubakar Salim was watching Hypnotic playing the game last night and even joked about the spear chucker comment. Abubakar the Salim. Sorry, I'm not trying to butcher your name. No. Says, quote, "Nah, I've clipped you using the speak already. You're finished." Oh well. I mean, I didn't hear it, but yeah. I mean, I wasn't there, but yeah, sure. Thank you for your comments. There was somebody else that I wanted to read. Even it wasn't like a thing they paid for, but neurodivergent means don't think like a normie, basically autistic people. Yeah, but it's a term that basically has come into fashion. It's just another identity. That's all it is. It's not. It doesn't really define anything. Yeah. Yuma's coat room. Oh, this is about legendary drops, hot takes, dude. is from the Midwest, and his manhood is going to be in constant opposition to his locally sourced indoctrinated population. He's also going to protect his new bag since Asmon reviewed one of his vids. Yeah, I mean, you're allowed free speech. You aren't allowed free speech, only them in their mind. Yeah.
Right.
Abu Bakr. Sorry. All right. So, yeah, we're going to end the show there. Thanks, guys, for coming. All I'll say, like, last word about this is that, you know, legendary drops, you're going to have to, like, find your spine, because the people, like, this constant framing of, like, one side is just as bad as the other side, it's cringe. I'm done with it. I've been dealing with this for 10 years. I know who's doing the bad thing, and they usually look like they're doing the good thing. So think about it that way. Maybe the people who are rough around the edges are probably better people because they are authentic. So anyway, thanks, guys, for coming on the show. If you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today, and please, please, please share this video. I think, actually, John, I just wanted to say that I might want to make the shows just once a week, but maybe they go a little longer, because I might want to make some time for other things that I want to do. I'm thinking about maybe just making like a video once a week on the day, maybe on the Tuesday, and then we'll just do the next Week in Culture actually as a weekly thing. So I don't know, just something I'm thinking about. I might let you know about that. That'll free up some time for you for other stuff too. So
right. Well, I mean, it's called the Week in Culture, and we are kind of like, I have no problem with it being
doing a bi-weekly, a bi-week, yeah. So we might change that up a little bit, but thanks, guys, so much for coming on the show, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Long live Vivian.
With the glass ceiling broken, all the oppressed groups shall prosper, especially the most oppressed group of all, gamers.
I want people in the industry to be a little bit louder about people being mean to other people, and maybe say it's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Maybe say we don't want you around if you're going to be a cunt.
Yeah.
And hateful. And that the games industry is diverse naturally. Not because anyone's making them be diverse. Because the world is diverse, you stupid motherfucker. And if you have a problem with that, come fight me. Physically. Bitch.
Has anyone taken you up on that yet?
No, because they're all pussies.
Yep.
Down here, salt is a way of life.
Obviously, the environment down here is all salt. The ceiling's salt, the floor is salt, the walls are salt, and to an extent, the air is salt. And you breathe that in, and you can constantly taste the salt.